It was just after 7:15 when Agent DeShawn Rucker got pulled over. No speeding, no noise, just one quiet street and one deputy who didn't care he was federal. 10 minutes later, guess who's in handcuffs? What happened in those few minutes will shock you, if you care about truth. Justice and power being held accountable. Don't scroll past. Like, share, and subscribe now. This is a story you need to see. It was just after 7:15 on a warm spring evening when Agent DeShawn Rucker saw the red and blue lights flare to life behind him. The sun hadn't quite disappeared yet, just a low amber smear dragging across the rooftops of Eastfield, Georgia, casting long shadows over driveways and clipped lawns. Sprinklers ticked softly in front yards. A couple of kids pedaled down the sidewalk on rusted bikes. Wind chimes clinked from a front porch, barely audible through the sealed windows of his government-issued black SUV. For most people, it was the end of a long, peaceful day. But, for DeShawn, it was about to become something else entirely. He wasn't speeding, not weaving, not distracted. He'd left Atlanta a little after 5, following a full day at a counterterrorism conference, security briefings, breakout panels, and too many cups of lukewarm hotel coffee. His tie was still clipped, but the top button of his shirt was undone. The drive had been uneventful, the kind that let your mind wander just enough to start imagining home. He had maybe 20 minutes left before reaching his quiet subdivision in River Glen. A hot shower, leftovers, maybe a phone call to his daughter. That's where his thoughts were until the cruiser came up behind him. No siren, just the lights, fast and tight. DeShawn signaled right and eased the SUV to the side of the road with deliberate control, coasting to a full stop near the corner of Westfield and Arbor Lane. It was a residential stretch, wide and empty, with only a few parked cars and a mailbox leaning slightly to one side. He exhaled, already setting his hands at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel. Every movement was practiced, careful, visible. He turned the engine off, rolled the window down just enough to speak through. His ID badge was on the passenger seat in plain sight, resting on top of the navy blue DHS folder from earlier that day. This wasn't DeShawn's first stop, but it never got easier. He was a 41-year-old black man in a black SUV with tinted windows, driving through a mostly white neighborhood at dusk. To some people, that was all the justification they needed. The patrol car behind him idled for a long moment before the driver's side door opened. A white male officer stepped out, stocky build, buzz cut. Somewhere in his 30s, with mirrored sunglasses still perched on his face despite the sun dipping below the trees. His right hand hovered near his holster as he walked up, slow and straight. He didn't call in the plate, didn't say hello, just walked up with that kind of posture that said this wasn't a routine stop, it was a power check. "You live around here?" he asked flatly. DeShawn didn't look over. He kept his eyes forward, hands unmoving. "I do," he said calmly. "License and registration." DeShawn nodded once. "My ID's in my jacket. Passenger seat. Registration's in the glove box. I'll reach for them slowly, if that's all right." The officer didn't respond, just stared. DeShawn moved carefully, slow and controlled like a surgeon. Jacket first, then glove box. He placed both documents on the dashboard before sliding them toward the officer. "May I ask why I was stopped?" "You were creeping," the officer said, "driving real slow, looking at houses." "Someone called it in, creeping," DeShawn repeated, eyebrows slightly raised. "I was going 27, just trying to get home." "You got anything in the car I should know about?" "No." The officer leaned back slightly, scanning the interior. "You acting nervous." DeShawn let out a breath, sharp and quiet. "I'm not nervous. I'm exhausted. Been working since 7 this morning. Just left a federal conference in Atlanta." That was the first clue. A subtle shift. The use of the word federal. It hit the officer differently, but not enough to change the script. "Step out of the vehicle." DeShawn blinked. "For what? I gave you a command." He paused. Then, reaching slowly to the passenger seat, he lifted his leather badge wallet and opened it toward the window. The Homeland Security badge gleamed under the fading sun. "I'm a federal investigator. Special Agent DeShawn Rucker. DHS, ID and badge are right here." The officer's reply landed like a slap. "I don't care who you say you are. Out of the car. Now." And that was the moment everything shifted. Not because the officer raised his voice, not because he reached for his cuffs, but because he made it clear. This wasn't about law. This was about control. DeShawn knew better than to argue, but he also knew the weight of silence. He stayed calm. Every breath, every glance calculated and clean. He stepped out, hands raised, still holding his badge, his voice low, even, measured. "You're making a mistake," he said. Not as a plea, as a fact. The officer name tag reading Kessler didn't blink, just spoke into his radio. "I've got a male refusing to comply. Claims to be federal. Requesting backup." By now, porch lights had started flickering on. A woman watering flowers across the street paused, hose still in hand. A teenager on a bike pulled out his phone and began recording. Another neighbor stepped out with a dog leash, slowing as he took in the scene. DeShawn didn't move, didn't resist, because that was the most powerful thing he could do. As the cuffs clicked tight around his wrists, too tight to be accidental, the air seemed to freeze. The stop was never about a crime. It was about a story one officer wanted to tell, and the story he never expected to be contradicted by video, by witnesses, or by someone who knew the law better than he did. DeShawn stood on that sidewalk, wrists bound, dignity intact, and power slowly shifting in the direction of truth. Backup was on its way, and with it, a reckoning. The street was quiet, but the tension was rising fast. From the outside, it still looked like any other suburban stop in Eastfield, just a cruiser with flashing lights, and a black SUV pulled neatly to the curb. But inside the moment, inside the heartbeat of it all, there was a current pulsing beneath the surface, something colder, older, and far more dangerous than traffic law. Deputy Wade Kessler walked like a man who'd already made up his mind. Mid-30s, stocky, a slow, heavy gait, sunglasses too dark for dusk, too deliberate to be casual. He carried himself with the bored arrogance of someone who believed a badge meant absolute authority, and tonight, that belief was about to meet a wall called DeShawn Rucker. He approached without a greeting. No good evening, no license and registration. Please, just that hand near his hip, hovering close to the holster, like he wanted it to speak louder than any words could. "You live around here?" he asked, chin tilted slightly forward. DeShawn didn't flinch. He didn't sigh, didn't bristle. He kept his eyes straight ahead, both hands still visible on the wheel. He'd been through this kind of dance before, the kind where the music wasn't made of instruments, but implications. "I do," he said plainly, his tone calm but firm. Kessler squinted like he didn't buy it. like the sight of a black man behind the wheel of a clean SUV was enough to trigger suspicion by default. His voice had that clipped, rehearsed tone, the kind of cadence that turned an assumption into an accusation without ever needing to say it out loud. "You got ID?" "Yes, sir," DeShawn said. Voice still level. "My credentials are in my jacket on the passenger seat. Registration's in the glove box." Kessler didn't respond with words. He just stared. And that stare carried a message DeShawn knew well. "I don't trust a word coming out of your mouth." DeShawn nodded once, as if giving himself internal permission to move. "I'm going to reach for them slowly. I'll start with the wallet." He moved deliberately, each motion slow enough to narrate, to prove, to survive. He retrieved the leather badge wallet from the seat, placed it on the dashboard, then the registration, then both, stacked neatly in his palm, extended toward the window. But Kessler didn't reach for them. He didn't even look. Instead, he leaned slightly back and let out a tight, clipped sentence. "We got a call about a suspicious vehicle," he said. "Somebody thought you were casing homes." DeShawn blinked once. "I was driving 27, he said. "Just headed home, looking real slow, stopping at driveways, creeping." That word again. Creeping? Not drifting, not driving, not even loitering. Creeping. The kind of word meant to criminalize your presence before anything factual was even mentioned. A word that lived at the intersection of bias and fear. A word that turned geography into justification. "I wasn't creeping," DeShawn said. Still calm. "I was navigating. Looking for a turnoff. I live 10 minutes from here." "You sure about that?" The question wasn't really a question. It was a test. DeShawn didn't take the bait. "I'm a federal agent," he said. "Department of Homeland Security. I just got back from a conference in Atlanta. My ID is in the wallet you haven't looked at yet." Kessler's face didn't change. His eyes remained hidden behind the mirrored lenses, but his lips curled slightly. Not in surprise, in challenge. "You got anything in the vehicle I need to know about?" "No." "You been drinking?" "No." "You on anything?" "No." "You sure seem tense." "I'm careful," DeShawn replied, "because I've had this conversation before." The deputy tilted his head, like he was waiting for DeShawn to slip, say something wrong, break character. But DeShawn wasn't in character, he was in training, honed by years of dealing with exactly this. "I've identified myself," DeShawn continued. "I've explained my presence. You haven't told me why you pulled me over. And you haven't looked at my ID." Kessler stepped a half-step closer to the door. Still no contact. Still no movement toward the documents. "You think that badge means something out here?" he asked. DeShawn could have snapped back. He could have invoked the law, the Constitution, even Kessler's own department's procedural manual. But instead, he just breathed. "It means I know the law," he said, "and I know when it's being ignored." There it was, just enough steel to hold the line, just enough calm to make it sting. Kessler didn't like that. He looked around once, saw a neighbor stepping out to check the mail, saw a kid on a bike slow down, then turned back to the vehicle. "Step out of the car." "For what cause? You match a description." Kessler lied without effort. DeShawn didn't argue. He didn't ask what description. He just reached slowly again, this time to unbuckle his seatbelt. Then he opened the door with care, stepped out, stood tall. He raised his hands slightly, not because he had to, but because he knew how this game worked when you looked like him. "My name is Special Agent DeShawn Rucker. My badge is in my hand. I am not resisting. I am not armed. I am not a threat. Kessler ignored all of it. Because this wasn't about protocol. It wasn't even about the 911 call. It was about a man in a uniform who didn't like being told he was wrong by someone who didn't look like him. From the moment Kessler laid eyes on DeShawn, the question had never really been, what's going on here? It had always been, do you belong here? And Kessler had already answered that question for himself. Long before the backup would arrive. He just didn't know this time. Someone was watching. And justice was already on the way. For a split second, time seemed to hesitate. The air in Eastfield felt heavier, like the street itself was holding its breath. DeShawn Rucker stood beside his black government-issued SUV, the cool edge of the spring evening brushing across his face. His hands calm and visible. In his right hand, his leather badge wallet lay open. The gold emblem of the Department of Homeland Security gleamed beneath the last threads of sunlight. His federal ID was tucked in the sleeve beside it, clear. Official. Indisputable. It was everything a trained law enforcement officer should need to immediately de-escalate a stop. But Deputy Wade Kessler didn't blink. He didn't lean forward to verify the ID. He didn't acknowledge the agency. He didn't pause to ask a question or double-check a database. Instead, the only thing that moved was his mouth. "I don't care who you say you are," he said flatly. "Step out of the vehicle." And just like that, the badge stopped mattering. This wasn't about law anymore. It wasn't about procedure. It wasn't even about suspicion. This was about dominance, about control. And DeShawn knew it. Every inch of his training told him so. He could feel it in Kessler's posture, in the tautness of the deputy's jaw, in the way his right hand hovered like a magnet to the buckle of his holster. This wasn't a traffic stop. This was a performance. But DeShawn wasn't going to give him the scene he wanted. He stayed steady, spine straight, voice measured. "Deputy, I've clearly identified myself. That badge and ID are real. If you need to verify, call dispatch. There's no reason for escalation." Still, Kessler didn't look down, didn't radio in, didn't verify a single thing. His lips curled slightly, not in confusion, not even in challenge, but in condescension. A sneer disguised as a smirk. "I gave you a command." DeShawn took a breath and slowly, without sudden movement, stepped fully out of the vehicle, both hands still visible, his voice low, calm, but now carrying a razor edge of certainty. "I am complying," he said. "But I am also informing you this stop is being conducted unlawfully. You've ignored my identification, refused to state probable cause, and failed to follow standard verification protocol." Kessler's chest puffed slightly. "You trying to lecture me now? I'm stating facts," DeShawn replied. "I'm doing exactly what I was trained to do, follow the law." Kessler took a step closer, the gap between them shrinking to just a few feet. Too close. The kind of close that didn't feel like procedure. It felt like provocation. "You think that badge gives you the right to talk down to me?" "No," DeShawn said, holding Kessler's gaze. "I think that badge proves I've earned the right to be here, just like you think yours does." The silence between them crackled, somewhere across the street. A neighbor's screen door creaked open. DeShawn could feel eyes watching. He could sense phones being lifted. He didn't know exactly how many, but it didn't matter. He wasn't speaking for Kessler anymore. He was speaking for the footage, for the record. for the truth. "You're making a mistake," DeShawn repeated. Now, louder. Clear enough for any recording device within range to pick it up. "And if you continue to detain me without cause, you are opening yourself to federal charges." Kessler's nostrils flared. His hand now rested directly on his belt. "You threatening me?" "That's not a threat," DeShawn said. "That's a warning." The two men stood there frozen, not in fear, but in a battle of wills. One powered by ego, the other by principle. One built on assumption, the other on facts. And yet, it was DeShawn, the federal agent, the lawful one who felt the cold click of the first cuff slide onto his wrist. He didn't resist. He didn't yank his arm away. He stood still, because in that moment, his stillness was more powerful than rage could ever be. "You're detaining a federal officer," DeShawn said, voice loud and clear. "This will be reviewed, every second of it." But Kessler didn't care, because Kessler had already decided long before he asked the first question that DeShawn didn't belong. Not in this neighborhood, not in that SUV, not in a suit and tie with a badge that looked too clean, too real for someone like him. He never even considered that the ID could be legitimate. He didn't want it to be. To him. The badge in DeShawn's hand was a challenge, not a credential, a threat, not a fact. So when the cuffs clicked again tighter than they needed to be, and DeShawn felt the cold bite of steel around both wrists, it wasn't a surprise. It was an inevitability. Still, he didn't break, because the moment wasn't about this stop anymore. It was about what came next. And what came next was justice. Across the street, a teenager recorded every second from the porch. The video had already begun circulating, shared, texted, uploaded, and with every frame. The story shifted from one man's word against another to a public reckoning caught in real time. Kessler thought this was just another stop, another flex of his badge, another moment he could twist into a report that said non-compliant suspect matched a vague description. But this time, the camera didn't blink. This time, someone was watching. And this time, the badge didn't protect him. The cuffs locked with a sound that echoed louder than it should have. Not just metal on wrist, but the final punctuation mark in a sentence no one like DeShawn Rucker should have had to say. "I am complying. I am not resisting. I am a federal agent." He had said it, clearly, calmly, deliberately, and still. Deputy Wade Kessler chose control over clarity. Still, the cuffs came. It was a strange kind of silence that followed. Not quiet. Exactly, there were still birds somewhere in the trees. Still the hum of the patrol car idling behind them. Still the faint clatter of a sprinkler in someone's yard. But beneath it all was a deeper, more weighted silence, the kind that wraps itself around injustice and dares anyone to speak first. DeShawn didn't speak. He didn't protest. His wrists, now locked behind him, pulsed with the first dull ache of compressed skin. Kessler had tightened them not accidentally, not by regulation, but with purpose. It was the kind of grip that said, "I'm in charge here, no matter what badge you flash." Kessler's radio crackled as he stepped back, still breathing heavy like a man who'd just won something. "Unit 12 requesting immediate backup. Subject is non-compliant. Claims to be DHS, suspected impersonation. Repeat. Possible impersonation of federal officer." That word impersonation hit like a punch to the gut. Not because DeShawn doubted who he was, but because, in that moment, Kessler's refusal to see the truth had transformed into a weaponized lie. Across the street, a screen door opened. A woman in a housecoat stepped out, watering can in hand. Her brows lifted as she took in the scene, a black man in slacks and a tie, standing beside a government vehicle, hands cuffed, head high, a few houses down. A teenage boy, maybe 16. Tall and rail-thin, stood at the edge of his porch, phone in hand. He was already recording. His hand didn't shake. He didn't say a word, just filmed, watched, witnessed. That was when DeShawn started narrating not for Kessler, who had clearly made up his mind, but for the phones, for the people watching, for the court of truth. "My name is Special Agent DeShawn Rucker," he said, loud enough to carry. "I work for the Department of Homeland Security. I've identified myself. This officer has not verified my ID. He has not given probable cause. I am not resisting." Kessler shot him a glare. "Keep talking," he muttered, stepping back toward the cruiser. "We'll see how that attitude sounds in the report." DeShawn didn't flinch. His voice never rose, never cracked. "This is not attitude," he said. "This is accountability. And I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to everyone else who's watching." The words hung in the air, heavy and deliberate, across the street. A man walking a golden retriever slowed his pace. Two kids on skateboards stopped at the corner. A curtain shifted in an upstairs window. Eastfield was beginning to watch, but Kessler wasn't. He was pacing now, one hand on his radio, the other brushing his belt like it made him taller. He still hadn't looked at the badge, still hadn't run the ID. His decision had nothing to do with confirmation. It was built entirely on assumption. "You think you can stand there with your fancy words and federal title?" Kessler snapped. "And that's supposed to mean something. You don't belong here." Rucker. It was the first time he said the name. Not sir, not agent, not Mr., just Rucker. Spat out like an accusation. DeShawn didn't reply. He didn't need to. The camera was still rolling. That teenager, Jalen, he'd later learn was now stepping a few feet off the porch, carefully angling his phone to get Kessler. The patrol car, and DeShawn all in one frame. His jaw was tight, his eyes were wide. But he didn't speak either. He didn't have to. The camera had become his voice. And DeShawn, he made his strategy clear with every breath. Stay composed. Stay visible. Stay alive. It wasn't about ego. It wasn't even about principle. It was survival, plain and brutal. The rules changed when your skin was dark and your badge didn't match your body. DeShawn had learned that lesson more than once. Tonight, he was living it again. The backup arrived 6 minutes after the cuffs were applied. 2 more cruisers, one from the same county, the other from the precinct just north of it. Both stopped with a sharp screech of gravel. One officer stayed inside. The other stepped out. A woman, mid-40s, slim build, hair pulled tight into a regulation bun, her uniform crisp, her eyes sharper than her posture. Lieutenant Karina Voss. She didn't shout. She didn't rush. She walked like someone who'd seen too many scenes like this and already knew how they ended. Her first look went to DeShawn. Hands cuffed, posture straight, calm, no threat, no fear. Her second look landed on Kessler, who turned quickly and tried to speak first. Suspect was acting erratic. Matched a suspicious vehicle report. Claimed he was Homeland Security. But Voss held up a hand. Slow down. She turned to DeShawn. Name Special Agent DeShawn Rucker, he said, his voice steady. Homeland Security investigations. My ID is in the wallet on the roof of my car. This officer refused to verify it. She stepped forward, picked up the badge wallet, flipped it open. 2 seconds. That's all it took. Her head jerked slightly. She looked at DeShawn again, then at Kessler. "You cuffed a federal agent?" she asked. He refused to follow orders. He was driving suspiciously slow, acting hostile. "Did you verify his ID?" He flashed a badge. "Could have been fake. I didn't want to take the chance." "Did he resist?" Kessler hesitated. He had an attitude Voss repeated, voice dropping like a hammer. It was only then that Kessler started to realize the weight shifting beneath his boots. DeShawn didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He had said everything that needed saying. Now the phones would carry the rest. And the record was already writing itself, click by click, frame by frame, one calm breath at a time. Because real power doesn't raise its voice. Real power doesn't need to prove itself. Real power holds the line while the rest of the world catches up. And DeShawn Rucker. He had held that line calm, cuffed, and unbroken. The third cruiser arrived with the kind of quiet authority that didn't need sirens, just presence. It rolled in slow, steady, and without drama, like it belonged there before the rest of them even showed up. The kind of arrival that didn't need volume to demand attention, the kind that shifted the air. And from the driver's side stepped Captain Lena Morales. She didn't slam her door. She didn't bark orders. She simply closed it with a soft click, adjusted the silver captain's bar pinned at her collar, and took one long, calculating look at the scene. A Latina woman in her early 50s. Morales moved like someone who didn't need to announce her rank. Her posture set it for her shoulders back, chin high, the slow, deliberate steps of someone who'd walked into 100 messes and cleaned up each one without flinching. Her eyes landed on DeShawn Rucker first, a black man in business attire, cuffed, silent, steady. Then on the black government SUV parked beside him, clean and untouched. Then up to the roof of the car, where the leather badge wallet lay open exactly where DeShawn had said it was. 2 seconds. That's all it took. Morales crossed the final few steps and picked it up. Her thumb flipped it open. DHS credentials, gold badge, laminated federal ID. She barely had to squint. The photo matched. The clearance level was high. The expiration date was current. The title, Special Agent. Homeland Security Investigations. Her jaw clenched. She turned toward the other voices now, the ones that hadn't stopped talking since she got out of the car. Deputy Wade Kessler was still explaining loudly, defensively, and with far too much confidence. Acted erratically, wouldn't answer direct questions, didn't comply when asked to step out, claimed to be federal, but didn't offer verification at first. "And I wasn't about to just take his word for it, Deputy," Morales said, not shouting, not even raising her voice, just cutting through the noise with quiet finality. "You cuffed a federal agent." Kessler blinked. He turned toward her like he hadn't realized exactly who was now on the scene. "Captain Morales." "Yes, but he didn't follow my instructions. I asked for ID. He said it was on the seat. That's not protocol. I couldn't verify if it was real, and I wasn't going to risk Morales held up the badge. This ID, she said, the one that was in plain sight. Exactly where he told you it would be." Kessler's mouth opened, but no words came out. DeShawn stood silently, watching her with unreadable eyes. He hadn't said a word since she arrived. He didn't need to. The badge spoke. The cuffs spoke. His silence now was louder than anything he could have said. Morales turned back to him. "Special Agent Rucker." "Are you injured?" "No," DeShawn said, his voice still calm. "Just disrespected." She nodded. "You'll have those cuffs off in 60 seconds. Then, without turning around, she called out, "Officer Vega, uncuff him." A younger officer, clearly uneasy, stepped forward. He fumbled for a moment, then removed the cuffs as quickly and carefully as he could. Red marks ringed DeShawn's wrists. He flexed them once, winced slightly, but said nothing. Morales faced Kessler again. "I want your body cam footage," she said flatly. "Right now." Kessler stammered. It's in the car. I was going to pull it. Go get it." She cut in. "And don't edit a second." He hesitated, just long enough to make it clear he was used to being the loudest voice on any scene. But this wasn't his scene anymore. Morales had taken it, without shouting, without force, just with truth. As Kessler turned and walked stiffly toward his cruiser, Morales stood beside DeShawn, eyes forward. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "only for him. This shouldn't have happened." "I know," he replied, "but it keeps happening." She nodded once, jaw tight, across the street. The crowd had grown. A few neighbors, a mother with a stroller, a teenager with a phone still recording, and standing nearest to the curb. The boy from earlier, Jalen, held his phone like it was sacred now. He hadn't stopped filming. Not since the cuffs. Not since the lie. Not since DeShawn's voice first declared who he was. And Morales knew it. This wasn't just about one stop anymore. This was going to be viral by morning. Kessler returned holding the body cam unit like a child holding a broken toy, uncertain, stiff, embarrassed. Morales didn't wait. She held out her hand. He placed it in hers. She pressed play. For 30 seconds. No one spoke. The footage was clear. DeShawn's voice. Calm and cooperative. "I'm reaching for my wallet now. My badge is on the seat. I'm a federal agent." The more it played, the more Morales's face changed. Her expression didn't explode, it compressed, tightened, hardened. Her hands stayed still, but her jaw locked. Her silence wasn't confusion. It was anger, cold, measured, and gathering weight. She stopped the video, looked at Kessler. "You ignored a valid federal ID. You refused to verify credentials. You escalated a stop without cause. And you unlawfully detained a federal officer." Kessler's mouth moved, but the words didn't land. He had an attitude, he said. He was confrontational. It wasn't normal. "An attitude," Morales repeated, her voice barely above a whisper, but sharp enough to cut through cement. "That's your justification." She took one step forward, toe to toe. "You think attitude is a crime? You think a black man calmly stating his rights is confrontation? You cuffed a federal agent in his own neighborhood for existing." Kessler flinched, not visibly, but enough. Morales didn't blink. "Internal Affairs will have this report, and so will the federal liaison. You're relieved of duty pending full investigation." He looked stunned, like accountability had snuck up on him while he was still trying to script his story. DeShawn looked on, still silent, still sore, still standing. Morales stepped back beside him. "I don't want an apology," he said quietly. "You won't get one from him." She replied, "But you will get justice." And in that moment, under the orange streetlights and the glow of dozens of camera phones, something subtle but seismic had shifted. Not just who held the badge, but who held the truth. The street was glowing now, not just from the amber spill of the street lamps, but from the screens. Dozens of phones, lifted and locked on, turned what could have been dismissed as another incident into a shared event. And at the center of it, Captain Lena Morales stood with the body cam in one hand and the weight of undeniable truth in the other. The video hadn't finished playing, but it didn't have to. What it showed in the first 60 seconds was enough. Clear as crystal, every frame exposed a simple and powerful fact: DeShawn Rucker had done everything right. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't moved suddenly. He hadn't resisted. His hands had been visible, his voice steady. He had identified himself not once, not twice, but 3 times, each time with the same professional clarity. The kind you can't fake. The kind that comes from being trained to stay alive in rooms colder than this. Morales held the body cam like it was radioactive, like she could feel the fallout before it dropped. She turned toward the growing circle of onlookers, all still watching, still filming, still waiting. And that was the thing about accountability in the digital age: it doesn't ask permission, it demands it. She didn't need to speak for the truth, to make noise, but she did. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, voice amplified just enough to reach the sidewalk. This footage clearly shows that Special Agent Rucker identified himself multiple times, complied with every instruction, and posed zero threat. What happened here was not a mistake. It was a failure of protocol and judgment. A quiet murmur rolled through the street. Kessler shifted behind her, pale and suddenly very small. The swagger had vanished from his stance. His badge, once a shield of ego, now felt like an anchor pulling him under. But it wasn't just the body cam, because then came the real tide, the wave of community footage that poured in one phone screen at a time. The teenager, Jalen, stepped forward first. His voice was low, almost respectful. "Captain, I've got everything from when he first stepped out of the car." Morales nodded. "Send it to this address." She handed him a card, DHS email printed in bold across the top. Another neighbor, an older man in slippers and a Georgia Tech sweatshirt, stepped out from his porch with a phone in hand. "I was recording from my living room. Through the window. I've got audio, too." He looked at DeShawn. "You were calm, professional. I saw it all, one by one." The neighborhood gave its statement not in ink, not in paperwork, but in pixels, multiple angles, multiple witnesses, one consistent truth. DeShawn Rucker had been profiled, ignored, and unlawfully cuffed. And it was all on record now. Morales had the body cam fed into her mobile tablet, already looping the relevant sections. She moved with precision, scrubbing through timestamps. Watching the moment DeShawn announced his credentials: Special Agent, Homeland Security. Pause. Kessler's blank face. "My ID is on the seat." Pause. Still no verification. Then the command, "Out of the car." "Now." She exhaled slowly, jaw tight, no noise, no threat, just authority being denied. Jalen stepped closer again, voice softer now. "You didn't even flinch." "Man," he said to DeShawn, "you stayed cool the whole time." DeShawn gave a quiet nod. "It wasn't for me," he said. "It was for the camera, for the story they'd try to tell later." Morales didn't interrupt. She understood something most didn't. People like DeShawn didn't get the benefit of the doubt they had to earn their survival second by second. She called Officer Vega over. "Start collecting names of anyone willing to submit witness footage." Ask if they'll give written statements as well. We're treating this as an active misconduct case." Vega nodded, moving into the crowd like someone who now realized he wasn't just a responder, he was a recorder of history. Morales then turned to DeShawn, still standing with his sleeves rolled back, red marks on his wrists like faint bruises of injustice. "You'll have access to everything," she said. "The body cam, the uploads, the reports, every detail." He nodded once. "I'll be submitting a full statement through DHS channels. I'll need copies of all footage." "You'll have it," she said again, firmer this time. "And for what it's worth, thank you. You handled this with more grace than most people could manage." "I didn't have a choice," he replied. "That's the part nobody talks about. Composure isn't a personality trait for us. It's survival strategy." She didn't argue, because she knew. The evidence wasn't just digital. It wasn't just external. It was in DeShawn's voice, his stance, his restraint. And it was now unavoidable. Even Kessler seemed to sense it. He was shrinking by the minute, his excuses thinning out like smoke in wind. The body cam had betrayed him. The neighborhood had seen him. And his silence now was the first honest thing he'd offered all night. Morales clicked off the body cam one last time. She turned to Vega. "Secure the footage. Back up everything. I want it encrypted and logged before the end of the shift. Then notify internal affairs. They'll want to move on this fast." "Yes, Captain," Vega said. "Already moving." Then she turned back to DeShawn. "You can go home tonight, Agent Rucker. But I'd like your official statement at precinct headquarters tomorrow morning." "I'll be there," he said. Jalen stepped forward again. "Can I send the video to the news?" he asked. "Unsure." DeShawn looked at him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Do it, but send it to my agency too. And keep a copy for yourself. Because this isn't just about me. It's about everyone who gets told they don't belong." And with that, the evidence was no longer just on tape. It was in the air, in the eyes of the neighbors who had always stayed quiet, but couldn't anymore, in the hands of a teenager who now understood that a phone can be armor, in the silence of a deputy who had finally run out of excuses, and in the voice of a federal agent who never once raised his voice, but raised a standard that would echo far beyond the borders of Eastfield. Captain Lena Morales stood still for a moment, her fingers wrapped tightly around the body cam unit like it was a verdict rendered in plastic and wire. The silence that hung over the street was no longer the silence of confusion. It was clarity. It was the kind of silence that came right after a storm breaks, and right before something permanent shifts. She didn't raise her voice, didn't pace, didn't perform. She simply turned toward Deputy Wade Kessler and said, calm as if she were reading a weather report, "Deputy, you're under arrest." The words hit harder than any shout could have. For a full second, Kessler didn't even move. His mouth opened slightly, brows pulling together, eyes blinking fast like maybe he hadn't heard her right. But he had. Everyone had. The neighbors, the kids, the dog walkers, the woman on her porch. Jalen, still clutching his phone like it was made of fire and truth. And DeShawn Rucker, standing just a few feet away, his hands free now, his wrists still red, his posture straight, but his expression unreadable. Kessler finally found his voice. "Wait!" What Morales didn't blink. "You are being charged with unlawful detainment of a federal officer, excessive use of force, and failure to follow lawful identification protocol." "You're serious?" he asked, his voice shrill now, cracking at the edges. "You're arresting me standard procedure," she said, already nodding to Officer Vega. "Handcuffs, Miranda, just like anyone else. Even Vega hesitated. You could see it in the way he stepped forward slow, unsure, like the air had suddenly thickened around him. It wasn't doubt. It was shock. Vega had seen plenty of people cuffed, but never one of his own. Not on the spot. Not by the book. Not in front of everyone. Captain Kessler began, his voice dropping to something pleading now. "Come on, Lena. I thought we're not anything," she cut in. "You assaulted a federal agent. You ignored lawful ID. You lied on your call-in report. That's not just misconduct, Wade. That's criminal." Kessler shook his head. "I didn't lie. I made a judgment call." "You didn't make a call," Morales snapped, voice finally rising just enough to cut through the night. "You made a decision. Before you even walked up to his window, you saw a black man in a clean car, in a clean neighborhood, and decided he didn't belong. And instead of checking a badge, you grabbed your cuffs." She turned slightly toward the crowd now, her voice more public, more deliberate. "That's not policing. That's power unchecked." Kessler's face flushed. His eyes darted to the phone still pointed at him. The quiet camera crew of everyday citizens who had become truth's last defense. He looked back at Morales like maybe, somehow, she'd reconsider. But she didn't. She never looked away. Vega stepped in. "Turn around," he said. Kessler's arms froze at his sides. He didn't resist. But he didn't move. "You can't be serious," he said again, softer this time, like maybe if he whispered it, the consequences would disappear. But they didn't, because this time, the cuffs weren't going on a black man for driving too slowly or speaking too clearly. This time, the cuffs were going on the one who abused the badge, slowly, methodically. Vega took his partner's wrists and clicked them into the same metal loops Kessler had used just 20 minutes earlier. The irony wasn't poetic, it was surgical, cold, precise, measured justice, not revenge. No one in the crowd cheered, no one jeered, no one said a word. The silence was thicker now, almost sacred. DeShawn didn't smile, he didn't smirk, he didn't gloat. Because this moment wasn't about triumph, it was about something quieter, something deeper. It was about balance. As Kessler stood cuffed beside the very cruiser he once patrolled from, his posture sagged slightly, like the weight of what he'd done was just now starting to settle across his shoulders. The badge on his chest hadn't protected him. The uniform hadn't shielded him. Not from the facts, not from the footage, not from the truth, and especially not from Captain Lena Morales. She stood beside him now, not as a colleague, not as a superior, but as a barrier between power and impunity. "You thought you were untouchable," she said, voice low and cold. "But no one is, not when the cameras are rolling, not when people are watching." Kessler swallowed hard. His voice came out in fragments. He had an attitude. He made me feel challenged. Morales's face didn't move. "Good," she said. "That's what the truth should do." She stepped away then, letting Vega guide the stunned deputy into the back seat of the cruiser, as the door closed with a dull thunk. A few neighbors finally exhaled. Some shook their heads. A few, including the older man with the Georgia Tech sweatshirt, clapped slow, soft, not for celebration, but for validation, not for punishment, for proof. DeShawn finally spoke. His voice was quiet, level, the same tone he'd used since the beginning. "I don't want an apology," he said. "I want accountability." Morales nodded, stepping beside him once more. "You just got it," she said. "And it's not over." Across the street, Jalen lowered his phone. "You think he'll lose his badge?" he asked, looking up at Morales. She glanced down at the boy, then across the faces gathered around her. "Depends on who's watching," she said. And Jalen, without hesitation, answered. "They're watching now." Morales didn't speak again. She just nodded once, sharp and certain, because what happened next would be in the hands of the system. But tonight. Justice had taken its first breath. The flashing lights had begun to dim, replaced by a deeper quiet that always follows the moment after truth is revealed. Officer Wade Kessler was no longer standing tall in the middle of the street. He was in the back of the cruiser, now silent, cuffed, and staring at nothing. Captain Lena Morales was already giving quiet orders to her team, organizing statements, securing footage, sealing the scene. But the real heart of it, the quiet pulse that still beat beneath the night, was standing just a few feet from the curb, holding a phone like it was a lifeline. His name was Keon. 16, maybe 17, a lanky frame, brown skin, a white hoodie that was too big for his narrow shoulders. He still had his phone up, not recording now, just staring down at the last few seconds of the video he'd captured. His fingers hovered near the playback bar, but he wasn't hitting play. He was just standing there, motionless, taking it all in like the weight of it hadn't quite settled. DeShawn Rucker was leaning against his SUV, finally allowing himself a long breath. His wrists still bore the red marks of those too tight cuffs. His mind was still wired, still scanning, still sorting every second that had led to this point. But when he noticed the boy standing just beyond the headlights, staring at him like he wasn't sure what came next, DeShawn straightened up and took a few slow steps forward. Keon spoke first. His voice was quiet, rough with something between awe and disbelief. You didn't yell," he said. DeShawn tilted his head slightly. "You didn't raise your voice. Didn't even cuss." Keon continued. "He had you in cuffs, and you just stayed cool." DeShawn looked at him, really looked at the boy's wide eyes, his uncertainty, the way his fingers gripped the phone a little too tightly. He knew that look. He'd worn it once, too. "Yeah," DeShawn said simply. "I stayed cool." Keon blinked. How DeShawn didn't answer right away. He glanced up at the houses nearby. Most of the windows were dark again, curtains pulled back in place, but a few faces still lingered in shadows. Quiet witnesses, trying to understand what they'd just seen. Then he looked back at Keon. "People think staying calm means you're weak," he said slowly. "But where I come from, calm isn't weakness, it's strategy, it's survival." Keon looked down at the phone, then back up. "If that was me, I don't think I could have done it." "You don't have to prove you're calm to anyone," DeShawn said. "Not to me, not to them. But sometimes when the world's trying to set you off, trying to bait you into becoming the story they expect, it takes more strength to stay still than it does to swing." Keon was quiet. DeShawn took another step closer. The streetlights washed everything in gold now. The red and blue flashes had faded to memory. "You did good," DeShawn said. "You pulled your phone out. You filmed. You didn't look away." Keon swallowed hard. "I wasn't sure it would help." "It did," DeShawn said. "It always does. Truth doesn't have to shout. Keon, sometimes it just has to be seen." Keon nodded slowly, but the tension in his shoulders hadn't left. His eyes kept flicking to the spot where Kessler had once stood, angry, armed, and unaccountable. DeShawn followed his gaze. "You want to know the part that stuck with me the most?" he asked. Keon nodded. DeShawn held up his wrists, showing the red lines still etched into the skin. Even when those cuffs went on, even when I was standing there wondering if I'd walk away from this with my career shattered, or worse. I knew one thing. "What's that you were watching?" DeShawn said. "That someone was. That it wouldn't just be my word against his. That this time, the truth had a camera and a witness who gave a damn." Keon's mouth pressed into a tight line. DeShawn took a breath. "Softer now. Keep that footage. Keon, keep it safe. Back it up. It's not just for me, it's for you. It's for the next time someone says, 'That couldn't have happened,' or 'He must have done something.' It's for your future, for the story you'll tell when someone else tries to rewrite it." The boy's throat bobbed as he swallowed. "I'll keep it," he said. DeShawn nodded. "Good." They stood there a moment, not as agent and civilian, not as adult and teen, but as two generations standing on the same side of a line the world kept trying to redraw. The weight of the moment wasn't just what had happened, but what it meant. Because tonight wasn't just about DeShawn's restraint. It was about what kind of world Keon would inherit. Would it be one where a black teenager could walk through his own neighborhood without fear? One where authority was earned, not abused. One where a badge couldn't silence a truth caught on camera. DeShawn didn't pretend to have those answers. But what he had, what he gave, was something more lasting than certainty. He gave Keon a model, not of perfection, but of power restrained, of dignity held, of fire that didn't need to burn everything down to prove it was real. Captain Morales walked back toward them, clipboard in hand, voice low as she coordinated with her officers. She caught DeShawn's eye, nodded once professional respect, exchanged without a word. Then she looked at Keon and gave him a look that said, "You mattered tonight." And it landed. DeShawn stepped back toward his SUV, placing one hand on the hood. The engine was still warm, the road ahead still quiet, but the boy's presence stayed with him. "Be safe out here," DeShawn said over his shoulder. Keon nodded. "You too." DeShawn opened the door, slid behind the wheel, and closed it gently. He didn't start the car right away, just sat there, letting the silence wrap around him like a breath held too long. Then he rolled the window down, letting the air in, behind him. The scene was still active, but something had shifted. Because a boy had seen the worst of a system, and a man had shown him how not to break beneath it. And that was the kind of lesson that no badge, no title, no uniform could ever teach. The street was finally beginning to empty. Porch lights dimmed, voices quieted, phones lowered. The crowd that had once surrounded the scene tight with tension. Breath held. Hearts pounding was now thinning out, dispersing back into the rhythm of ordinary life. But what had just happened was anything but ordinary. What unfolded in that suburban stretch of Eastfield, Georgia, would not stay on this block, or in this neighborhood, or in the quiet hush of night. It would travel. Because the truth always does. Agent DeShawn Rucker stood beside his black SUV, the same one that had been mistaken for a threat just 45 minutes earlier. His wrists ached. The red marks from Deputy Kessler's cuffs were still etched in his skin, like someone had tried to erase his authority by force, but failed. His dignity, though tested, remained untouched. That's the thing about dignity. It doesn't bruise easy. Not when it's rooted in something deeper than pride. Not when it's earned every day in a world that tries to strip it away. Captain Lena Morales stepped up beside him. Her presence was still steady, her clipboard now tucked under one arm, her jaw clenched, not from anger but from purpose. "You good to drive?" she asked. Voice quiet, personal. DeShawn gave a tired nod. "I'm good." She watched him for a moment, then glanced over at Officer Vega, who was still coordinating with witnesses, collecting files, gathering every piece of evidence like it was holy, because tonight it was. Morales turned back to DeShawn. "I know this won't undo it," she said. "The stop, the cuffs, the questions." "No," DeShawn said, "but it's a start." She nodded, lips pressing into a thin, solemn line. Then she said it not like a catchphrase, not like a rehearsed slogan, but like a quiet promise between professionals who knew how slow justice could crawl. "Discipline may take time," she said, "but the truth starts here." That was the final word, the kind of line that closes a moment, not with fanfare, but with finality. DeShawn opened the driver's side door, paused, then looked out one more time across the block. Keon was still standing near the curb, not filming anymore, just holding his phone by his side like it had become something sacred. He didn't wave. He didn't speak. He just nodded once, slow and respectful, and DeShawn returned it. He climbed in, shut the door, and took a long breath. The engine hummed quietly to life. He didn't peel away, didn't roar off with adrenaline still burning. Instead, he eased forward, rolling down the window to let the night air in, the smell of wet grass and cooling pavement mixed with something else now, something cleaner. A breath of change, just beginning to form. As the SUV turned the corner and disappeared into the dark, the uploads had already begun. Keon's footage, Jalen's footage, the porch recordings, the window captures, Morales's body cam, all of it syncing, circulating, pinging servers and screens in real time. It would be on social media in minutes, on a journalist's desk by morning, in inboxes of federal agencies by midday. It was already beyond the boundaries of this street, already bigger than one badge, one deputy, one evening. Because DeShawn didn't just walk away with sore wrists. He walked away with a record. He walked away with the receipts the world always demands from people like him when they dare to say, "I didn't do anything wrong." He didn't yell. He didn't fight. But he also didn't flinch. And now, every second of that restraint was digitized, time-stamped, geolocated, and unerasable. Inside the cruiser, still parked behind the tape, Kessler sat in stunned silence, staring at the floor like the gravel beneath his boots had vanished. The reality was sinking in slowly. He wasn't going home in uniform tonight. He wasn't clocking out. He wasn't writing a report that twisted the truth into a convenient fiction. He was the report now. Morales didn't linger. She had work to do, and DeShawn had earned his exit. But even as she coordinated the next steps, file numbers, internal inquiries, early case notifications, she knew this wasn't just a policy issue. This was culture, and if tonight had proven anything, it was that the only way to change culture is to start the story differently. DeShawn's drive was quiet. He passed familiar corners. Streetlights flickered by like distant candles. His phone buzzed in the passenger seat messages from his supervisor. Alerts from DHS's internal affairs. One missed call from an unknown number. But he didn't reach for it yet. Not yet. Tonight wasn't about reaction. It was about reflection. He thought about Keon, about the kid's eyes, The way he'd looked at him, not like a hero, but like someone who had shown him something no textbook or news story could. Control isn't just about power. Sometimes it's about not giving it away. He thought about Morales, her sharp, calm voice, the way she never once hesitated to pull rank, not to protect her own, but to protect what the badge was supposed to stand for. He thought about Kessler, how he collapsed in on himself when the system he thought would always shield him suddenly stood up and spoke back. And mostly, he thought about the footage, how it told a story that couldn't be shouted down, how it started something, maybe not justice, not yet, but momentum, the kind of momentum that doesn't need a courtroom to begin, the kind that begins when people stop scrolling, when they start watching, when they start questioning what power looks like and who it serves. By the time DeShawn pulled into his driveway, the sun was long gone. His porch light clicked on, gentle and automatic. The house looked the same, quiet, familiar, but everything else had shifted. Inside, his inbox was already filling. Bureau leadership, Civilian Complaints Division, 2 reporters. But DeShawn didn't open anything just yet. He poured a black coffee, sat at his kitchen table, and watched Keon's video on loop. The stop, the badge, the cuffs, the calm, the truth. Over and over. Until it was no longer just about what happened. It was about what would happen next. Because the badge hadn't saved him. But the truth had. And now the real reckoning was only just beginning. What happened that night in Eastfield wasn't just about one officer, one agent, or one mistake. It was a mirror held up to a system. A reminder that truth needs witnesses. From the moment Agent DeShawn Rucker was pulled over at 7:15 in the evening, to the second Deputy Wade Kessler was cuffed and placed in the back of a patrol car. This story revealed something deeper, that power unchecked becomes dangerous, but power held accountable can restore trust. And what made the difference? A phone. A teenager named Keon, a captain with integrity, and a man who stayed calm not because he was safe, but because he had to be, as American citizens. We all have a role to play in that moment of decision when someone asks, "Do you belong here?" The answer shouldn't depend on your skin, your badge, or your zip code. It should depend on the law, and the law should work for everyone. What DeShawn taught us wasn't just about restraint, it was about resolve. That composure isn't silence. It's strategy. It's not passive. It's powerful. And when combined with truth, technology, and people willing to stand up, it can lead to real change. This story wasn't just about injustice. It was about intervention. About a captain who stepped in. About neighbors who didn't turn away. About cameras that didn't lie. That's the America we have to keep building one stop. One voice. One video at a time. So if this story moved you, if you believe accountability matters, don't let it end here. Take action now. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and most importantly, share it with your friends, your family, your community, because someone out there needs to see what happened at 7:15 p.m. in Eastfield. They need to know what calm looks like under pressure, what courage sounds like without shouting, and what real leadership does when the cameras are rolling. The next time someone says, "That could never happen here," send them this video, because it did. And because change doesn't start in courtrooms, it starts with all of us.